Yeah, it's the morning caffeine.
The morning caffeine. That's what everybody says, apparently. Apparently the caffeine is what is keeping people calm and...
Yeah. You would think it'd be the opposite, but yeah. No, it's been a crazy market, and, we've had definitely some people that are ramped up, but, like we were saying earlier, I think the experience of, I've been through this market now a couple of times, where we've had that inventory shortage, where we've had buyers, coming out of the woodwork. Now, granted, this is an even lower market availability than what we've had in the past. But still, I mean, with over 500 transactions, you learn how to get your client's best foot forward and try and be the pilot of taking them through turbulent weather kind of a deal.
You also maybe notice, I would guess realize what is a small smoldering fire that just needs a quick bucket of water versus the whole house is on fire and the deal might blow up. I mean, there must be some of that. And, it's easy to fret about every single facet of a deal if you don't have the experience. Well, it's a speed bump.
Yeah. Well, there's that. And then when the agent-to-agent negotiations or, when you're negotiating on behalf of the buyer and the seller, you have to know when to come across with a harsh point of view, kind of more blunt, and when to kind of work towards a win-win. So, I mean, there's times, just had a deal, appraisal came in $35,000 below the offer. We had a couple other offers that were all around the same price point. And, the buyer's agent came back to me and basically said, look, you're going to sell it to us at this price, which is $35,000 low, or we're going away. And I basically said, pack your bags. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden they came back and said, well, hold on a minute. And that's experience. That's knowing when you can push those buttons and when you need to reel back and, the client's going to lose some money.
Yeah.
So,
do you tend to find that there are a lot of those moments in a transaction?
There are some transactions that go very smoothly and there's none of those moments. And then there's other transactions where it seems like every second day you're having a negotiating point that you've got to deal with. And there's no way of knowing going into the transaction which one you're going to get. So, yeah, I mean, I spend a lot of time negotiating. But that, frankly, is part of the reason I got into real estate is because I always loved that aspect of it. Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm the guy that had, I think, 15 different cars before I was in my mid-20s because I liked going and negotiating with car lots, and people just think that's twisted.
That is twisted, Cory. I couldn't think of a better word to describe it other than a little twisted. When you start looking at the experience as you go through these transactions, I mean, you talk about maybe putting together the contract, maybe you talk about negotiation, the appraisal. I mean, all these, the inspection, there's so many different, I would guess you could call them stress points in a transaction where your buyer or seller may freak out because, they're emotionally charged on the whole thing. How do you help keep them, how do you keep that deal moving forward with, your experience?
Well, I think a big part of it is, having been a project manager for years before I got into this business and having done this for over a decade, the clients just know I'm taking care of them. I'm watching all the little details. I'm not going to miss important points. There's a comfort level when you have a guide that's truly a guide to mentor you through the process. And, regardless of whether you hire me or hire someone else, that is something as a buyer or as a seller I think you need to look at. I think you need to look at the personality match, and I think you need to look at, okay, is this person experienced? Are they going to follow this entire process from beginning to end and be my advocate and control the process?
Your Sherpa.
Yeah.
I mean, right? In some ways, it's like climbing a mountain trying to get a house bought or sold. I mean, you want someone who truly can guide you. And, every time a pine cone falls on a tree, it's not the mountain collapsing.
Right.
I am metaphorically beautiful today, aren't I?
Yeah, except for the Sherpa incident on Everest, which,
didn't they get in a big fight or something?
Yeah, they beat the tar out of a few climbers, I guess.
Wow.
So, yeah, I don't want to be that Sherpa. Well, there's times where
but maybe that's the inexperienced Sherpa, right? I mean, the Sherpa who didn't quite have the experience to weather the storm, and they flipped out, and they didn't have their Zen moment when they needed it.
Yeah, or the horrible client.
Yeah, right?
Yeah, no, it's, there's always stress, right? And it's just a matter of trying to minimize it. This is such an emotional time for most people. On a seller's standpoint, a lot of times the seller, it's more of a business decision. The buyer, it's almost 100% emotional decision unless it's an investment. And so you end up really trying to balance and calm people down a lot. So
when a buyer goes in and it's emotionally charged and they get into almost this auction mentality of like, yes, I want it. Oh, it's only 5,000 more. It's only 10,000 more. I mean, do you have to sometimes keep them at bay to keep them from having buyer's remorse down the road or backing out of the deal? Do you ever find yourself, keeping them from maybe going off a fiscal cliff?
Yeah. I mean, I just had one with 8 offers, one with 10 offers, and one with 12 offers all this week. And on all 3 of them, I advised my client as to where I felt the top was and where I didn't think they should go above, and none of the 3 of them went above it. We didn't get any of the 3 houses, and that's okay. We'll get the next one. Mm-hmm. We've won other offers, but, just because your neighbor wants to pay that much for a house doesn't mean you should pay that much for the house. Mm-hmm. There will be other opportunities. And if it's the right fit, I mean, the flip side of that is if it's the perfect house for you, if you pay $5,000 more than it's worth, it doesn't really matter. In a year from now, you're going to recoup that $5,000. Mm-hmm. With what the interest rates are now versus what they're going to be a year from now, your monthly payment is going to save you far more than that $5,000. And that's part of the reason why we have so much pressure right now on the market is that some people are starting to see that. So they're willing to pay that $5,000. But then the next guy is saying, well, if he's going to pay the $5,000, I'm going to pay, $7,500.
Yeah.
And so it's getting ramped up a little bit too much. But, it'll all settle out. It always does.
So 10 to 12 offers. I mean, that's a lot of people buying a house. I mean, it's a lot of, are they just a house or are these things like super sexy? If a house can be super sexy.
Yeah, no. I'll tell you, the one that had the 8 offers was not super sexy. It was on an arterial. It was in decent but not great condition. And to Eric's point, the agent that was in there locked me out of the house.
Really?
And I literally had to go into the backyard, knock on the windows, and she looked at me and was like, what are you doing? And I said, you need to let me in so I can see this house. It's getting dark. And she was actually fairly argumentative, speaking of, experience level and what they should do and what they shouldn't. Just so happened I knew a bunch of the kids in the neighborhood, and they happened to be walking by. I'd coached them in football, and I literally was about to rally 6 kids and have them all go knock on the windows and just bug them until they opened the door. But she finally let me in.
I like your style. I mean, if there's nothing more mature than having a bunch of kids go and rattle windows.
Yeah. Well, and in all honesty, I mean, they were standing at the counter writing an offer, and I thought, if she's not going to let me in, I'm just going to make it a nightmare for her to get this deal.
Yeah.
And maybe that's not fair, but my clients didn't hire me to be fair, right? I mean, they just hired me to get them a house.
Sure. Cory Brandt joins us. Cory, we have a couple minutes left. Do you tend to find that this is sometimes what it takes, though, to get the deals done? I mean, getting kids to pound on windows, I know you didn't actually do that, but, I mean, you do have to go above and beyond sometimes. It's not just your standard deal, and a lot of new agents really need to get trained in the standard deal before they maybe have the moxie to go get some of these tougher deals done. Is that a fair comment?
That's a very fair comment, and that's why you saw, in 2008, you saw a lot of agents leave the business, is because they had come into the business in 2005, 6, and 7 and thought, oh, this is easy. All I got to do is show up with a pulse, and I can make a living. And the reality is there's a lot more to real estate than just that.
And you could do it back then.
Yeah, you could, actually. And I'm starting to see a little bit of that now, which, I still question how people make their hiring decisions, but that's, up to them.
So that's a whole nother topic, isn't it?